Okay. Okay. This part will be quite short, and after me, Alexandra will talk. Okay. I just want to let you keep in mind that from my perspective, we have a very strict practice of the GDPR and of the national laws. Just remember that. So when I'm talking about collaboration across countries and institutions, you might think that not all countries will practice this GDPR as strictly as we do. So we do things the way we are told by the EU, even if you're not a member of the EU. Okay, so we do what we are told. But at the same time, my colleagues throughout Europe that work in archives, they will advise you to gain the legal consent if possible, especially if you're going to archive or reuse the data. It will be good to have this consent that will be able to document afterwards. So if it's possible for you to do that, right? And also, I didn't want to do this, I didn't want to kill you with information today. But I need to tell you that we are not talking about the GDPR. There are also national legislation on different areas, right? So there could be national legislation on different research areas, and there could also be different ethical demands on different research areas. You need to keep that in mind, right? For Norway's case, we have national legislation on health research that gives us some trouble. It's difficult to handle it because we have the national legislation and then we have the GDPR. And maybe you will have this here in Croatia also, or in other countries. And of course, if you are going to conduct research in other countries, you have to check the national legislation as well, as you have to apply to the GDPR. So it's not to make this very difficult for you, but keep that in mind. It's possible to conduct research all over the world. It's possible. Researchers have done that for decades and always. But there are I have some tips. So I will give some example, of course, from my work. So it will be very close to the Norwegian cases. I will also tell you I will also give some advice on information security and different how to make agreements, but I'm not an expert on that. And okay. So Norway is not a member of the EU, but we are a part of the EEA. So this means that the GDPR will also apply to non-EU countries such as Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. So these are the 3 countries that have also included the GDPR in their legislation. So, the data controller is the institution or researcher that decides the use of the data. Okay, and the data processor is the institution or person that will process the data on behalf of the researcher, right? Is this confusing for you? Have you heard about this concept before? Because sometimes when you are collaborating, if my institution in Norway will collaborate with an institution in France, so maybe they will say, okay, but France is a data processor of the data. I will say, but are they a collaborator? So maybe you are 2 data controllers. So if your collaborators are data controllers, that means that they can decide on how to use their data. They are also data controllers, and then you need to share the responsibility for for the project, and you also need to share the assessments, and you have to decide on the legal basis, how to gain the consent, how to give information, all of that. So if your collaborators are also data controllers for their data, or you're going to share data, you need to agree on the legal basis. So one Norwegian researcher was collaborating with France, and France said that the legal basis is public interest, and Norway said, no, it's legal consent. So that would be a problem, because then it's difficult for us to make an assessment on the Norwegian part of the project when France say public interest, right? So then we have to ask, are you going to share personal data between yourselves, okay? Will the Norwegian data stay in Norway? Will the French data stay in France? Then it will be easier for you all, right? But if you're going to send data between institutions, then you have to agree on the legal basis and the consent, the information, and the data security, how to store it and how to send it. Okay, so all of this you need to think about. And another project I was working with, they had collaborators in many different countries. And they had workshops regularly to meet up, and they discussed all of this. Legal basis, how to gain the consent, how to give information, how to secure the data in the fields. And they met up and they discussed it maybe once or twice a year. This is a long-term project they were handling then. Okay? So these are things you need to think about. Are you planning on doing collaborating research with other countries? Anyone? Or yes? Yeah? And of course we want to do that, but sometimes it could be difficult, right? So if you do this inside the EU, it is not impossible and it's not difficult. You need to talk with your fellow researchers, and you also need to have an agreement. Do you have a written agreement with people you collaborate with? Is that normal for your institution to have like a template? And when we are going to collaborate with another institution, we have this written agreement on how to use your data? Do anyone know that you have that?
I think we do have agreements, but I'm not sure what's specified in them.
Right, yeah. So from my experience, yes, yeah. So I think that if you're going to collaborate, ask your institution to provide you with a template or an agreement. So they should have people in the institution that can know that legal stuff, that can set up a contract between you and the other institution on how to deal with the data, who owns the data, how to handle the data, etc. Okay? But you need to discuss, I said, okay, discuss the legal basis, how to gain the consent, how to give information, how to keep the data safe, right? You have to discuss it, you have to meet up. So the consent as a legal basis, which means that you need to document the consent and it needs to be explicit. That's common in some countries, like my country. In other countries, it's not that common. How about your country? Do you use consent as a legal basis, or you don't know? No. And I don't expect you to have much experience on it now, because the GDPR is quite new, so we don't know. But if you can gain the consent as the legal basis, that's good. I will be happy, okay? And the authorities will be happy if you can gain the legal consent. That will be good, right? But if it's not possible, you can also say that your legal basis is public interest. And in my country, this is most common for data collected on the internet. We can use public interest as a legal basis on data from the internet. Of course, it's difficult to gain a legal consent when you are not in contact with people face to face. Okay. Then it's most common to use that. Also for the public registries, we have a lot of them in Norway. It's not possible to gain consent, a legal consent from the whole population, but you are allowed to use this information in research. And also for your example, anthropology and fieldwork studies, ethnography, it's also difficult to gain the consent. And also when you are collecting information, not only on the internet. When I'm talking about internet, I'm not only talking about social media, I'm also talking about information that you can find publicly. Okay, so if you can find something that is published already, like from newspapers, it's difficult to gain the consent from people that have written an article. You can, of course, write about the article and you don't need to gain the consent, right? So it could be social media, and it could be other public information. So we use public interest, but you might need to inform people that are affected by your research, as we were talking about in the other session. So, and of course, our practice is different from Norway, from Sweden and Denmark and Finland. And I think I'm not sure, I don't have experience from projects that are collaborating with them and how this will affect. I have the experience between Norwegian and French, and also with the Norwegian and a lot of other countries. But I think it depends on how you start out the project and how you define your roles. So if you are planning on sharing data across countries, I think it's very important to discuss all these questions we were discussing about consent when you're starting. If you're not going to share data, if you're only going to keep your data in your countries and you're just collaborating with sharing IDs or reading your articles, then you will not be sharing personal data. So if you're not going to share personal data with other countries, you can just think about this as a national case. You can have the assessment done here in your own country. But if you are going to need an assessment from different countries, I think you need to think about that your design is similar in all countries if you're going to share the data. You agree on that? So if you're not going to share, think about the assessment is going to be done in your country. If you're going to share, you need to decide on how to design it when it comes to consent, the legal basis, how to keep the data safe. Okay? Every country can have national legislation on different areas or fields, and they can also have national legislation on this field. But we haven't stated that that consent as a legal basis is something that is necessary. We have to use. It's just the historically. Okay. Yes, it's historically.
Mm-hmm. It's like a traditional law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm not. I think. No, I say I think because I didn't check it. But I think that Sweden has stated in the national legislation that they can use public interest. So you could state in a national legislation that you should use this legal basis for research. You can state it. Norway hasn't done it, so we can choose. So it's the authority or the service provider. We are a service provider. We follow the historically, what we have done historically, and what the national authorities tells us is the best practice. Yeah. There can be a national legislation on which legal basis you have to use. There can be.
Is there a choice, or it's just
in the GDP? Yeah. Okay. So.
Legislation obliges you to use just one if you actually have a kind of data for which you can use another. So I suppose it's usual to recommend that kind and recommend that it is possible to do research on a legal basis of
Public interest. Yeah. So the GDPR. Yeah. So the GDPR will be above the national legislation most of the time. So if you don't have national legislation on this issue, then the GDPR will apply. So, and the GDPR states that you have different legal bases, and you can choose. You have to argue that my legal basis is public interest or my legal basis is consent. And for Norway's case, it's more like an historically thing that we have. And of course, the national authorities, they strongly tells us to do this, okay? They advise us very strongly to use consent as a legal basis. So, and of course, in other countries, there could be another kind of legislation or advice from the national authorities. Yeah. And I think that you have to check it out. And that's why it's important to meet up with other research fellows you are collaborating with, right? To ask them, okay, what is the case for your country? How will we do this in a way that will suit every country's legislation? Okay, so and you can have different national legislation on including children in research. Remember, okay. So for Norway's case, the age is 18 mostly, but if it's health research, it's 16, and that's difficult for us because we have to differ between health research and other research. And researchers, they don't really understand, okay, but why is it 16 here and then it's 18 in another field? And then we have to explain, because we have this national legislation on health research. So it makes, it's a big confusion, right? So I think it's important to check if there are national legislation in the countries that you are cooperating with also. And yeah, how do we do that? I think the easiest thing is just to talk to each other, have workshops, meet up, discuss all of these topics and issues with your fellow researchers across the world. So, and even though public interest is common in many countries, you need to ensure that you have the ethical consent, right? We were talking about the ethical consent. And what is the ethical consent? Well, it means that you ask for permission to collect information about people you meet. Or even if you meet them online, or you meet them in person, you ask them, do you want to participate in my research, right? And then you have to meet the ethical standards from your field or from your country, right? So I think we are not going to do something that is unethically, even if we are not using the consent as the legal basis. You can use public interest as a legal basis and still be, ethically. You can do ethically research. But you also have to ensure the rights of the data subject, and that is transparency, information, access, rectification, erasure, and the restriction of processing, notification, and data portability when it's possible and relevant, right? So we were talking about when it's relevant. One case from Norway is it possible to, data portability means that you have the right to get your data from someone and put it in another place to someone else. And mostly I don't think we have examples from the research area that you can go to the research and ask, can I have my data and give it to someone else? I think that's, well, so I don't think it's relevant for research, but it's a right, even though it's a right. So you have to say something about that. I cannot find examples when it's relevant to take your data and go into another. You can of course get your data from the research if you want to withdraw, but it's not necessarily that you can give it to someone else. You can have it, but then we're not talking about data portability, then we're talking about withdrawal. Okay, so it's two different things. And of course, when it's possible to meet their rights, right? So if it's not possible to give individual information to every person you are including in your research, then you can state that it's impossible for me to do that. I cannot do that. If I need to do that, I cannot finish my project because it's too demanding. It will cost too much. It will take too much time. It's not possible to do that. Okay. So inside the EEA, I want to say that I think you can, I say I think, I'm not sure if everyone will agree, but it's possible to use the same data protection impact assessment if you have made one, or if we have made one, you can use it for the whole project, even if you are doing the project in different countries. It means that the data protection impact assessment has to be approved by your institution, right? So it's a written document, and your institution and your DPO has to approve it, right? So if your institution approves it, you can also ask your collaborating institution to approve the same data protection impact assessment, okay? So you can sort of, it's the same data, same assessment for the same project, even though you are doing it in several countries. And that is also why we need to meet up and discuss the content of the assessment, right? And the assessment, it will also talk about all those things I was telling you about, the legal basis, the information, the consent, and how to secure the data. So it will contain all of these important aspects as well as several more. Okay. And there are templates for this, and you have a list from the authorities also when to do this and what to write in it. Okay. Have any one of you used a data management plan? Is that a common concept here? Yes. Good, because that's something else. A data management plan, it can be, it defines how you are going to collect data, share the data, reuse the data, and who you will collaborate with. It's like an organizational plan of the project. You put in all information that you need for the project, right? And most of the time you have like templates, or you can have an online plan you can use. So my NSD, we have this this online you can look at. You can access it and you can look at it. Do you have it here also, this online DMP in Croatia? Or do you have a template?
I don't know how many researchers are doing DMP right now, because there is no requirement from our research agency to do so.
Okay.
But probably some researchers who are doing international research in collaboration with other countries, and they already use some kind of template.
Yeah.
And there is this one recent experience where where the funder didn't ask for DMP, but we pushed it in the project applications to make our methodology better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were using basically SESTA data management guide for that.
SESTA management plan, yes.
And there you can also, so it's SESTA data management expert guide.
Yeah.
And there you can find a checklist of important topics where you what you do, and also templates for writing data management plan. So in our project we use
So I will advise you to, if you get funding from the EU, you will probably need a DMP. You will probably need to give them a DMP. And of course you can use the SESTA expert tour guide and SESTA. So on the SESTA website, you will find more information. Yes. So on the SESTA website, you will find a lot of tools, also tools for the DMP, and also more tools about these subjects. Okay. So use that, or you can ask me after this session. Okay. Yeah, we have it on sound. Good. So What about countries not in the EU? You have this standard EU agreement on how to handle data outside the EU. And I think I'm not sure, I don't have any personal experience on using that one. Do you know, Marianne? I have to ask you about the standard agreement on the EU for transferring data outside the EU.
Our national data protection agency has some recommendations on their website.
Yeah.
I think that would be the same.
Yeah. Do you have that also? National recommendation on the website? Yes. Yeah. So check out with the national authorities. They will have information on how to transfer data outside the EU. Okay.
We have also been discussing if you can use consent.
Yeah, consent for, but you need.
In some in article, I think it's 49.
Yeah.
There are some rare cases where you might consider using consent.
Only consent. Okay, so we are.
Very, very sort of explicit.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are discussing also, is it possible only to use consent for transferring data outside the EU? And I don't think we have landed on that question in our case. And I think that is, maybe you haven't discussed it either.
Well, I think that consent would be
Sufficient?
Yeah, more applied.
Okay, more applied here. Okay, yeah. So she said that maybe it will be, consent will be more applied here than.
You need to explain the risks with the transfer.
Yeah, you of course, if you base it on consent, it has to be explicit, right?
I mean, you have to have a legal basis on the Article 6, which is
Yeah.
consent, and if it's about the special categories of data,
Mhm.
then the legal basis from Article 9
Mhm.
is explicit consent, and then also you have to have something from the Chapter 5 of the GDPR.
Yeah. So she said that you need the explicit consent for special categories and the consent, the legal consent for the ordinary kinds of personal data, not special categories. And also there are some requirements in Chapter 5. And I think that the national authorities' website will be the best place to get more information about how to deal with sending the personal data outside of your country. Because we don't have a lot of experience on it yet. We have discussed it in Norway, and there's a lot of discussion, as Marianne can tells me here now, because we have not landed on how to do this. But I think if you're not going to transfer data outside of the EU, this is not a problem, right? And if you're going to collect data from outside to the EU inside, there's not a problem in the same way. But you have to apply, of course, to the GDPR in the other ways. Or did I say something wrong?
No, you didn't. I
No.
just want to add that the easiest thing to do is to use standard contractual
Yeah.
clauses, which are approved by European Board and Commission,
Yeah.
and you can find it in our website and on the website
Yeah.
of the Commission, and just to put it when you are transferring the data
Yeah.
to the country.
Yeah. So you can have the standard clause from the EDPB and Commission, and you will find it on the national website for the national authorities, and then you can have the link and more information. So I don't think this will apply for a lot of people here, but we are just talking about it still. Okay? So you will remember this confusion, and then you will think about it if it applies to your project. Okay? Yes? Or any more questions? No. Okay. Yeah?
They are also still on the website.
Yeah. So they are talking about that there are different levels of security or adaptation to the GDPR in other countries outside the EU. And of course, this is something you might need to check out if you are collaborating with the US or Canada or Japan, Asia, you name it. So just check it out, and hopefully you will have people to help you with this if it's relevant for you. Okay, so I will not say something about that. I will just sum up, because now the time is running. So investigate early which laws apply to your project. Right, so if you are doing a national project, investigate the laws that will apply to it. If you're collaborating, investigate in all countries that you are going to do research in or collaborate with, okay? Do not collect personal and sensitive data if not relevant to your project. So you have to decide, is this relevant for my project or not? Do I need those data? Sometimes you might end up collecting more data than you need because you didn't think before you started. Seek advice from your research office if you have one, or other people like me, or SESTA website, or your national authorities. Meet up with your partners from other institutions. Okay, meet them face-to-face or Skype or phones or emails, whatever. Talk with them, discuss all of these issues. If you need personal and sensitive data, inform and get consent from the participant if possible. Okay? And you might need an ethical and legal assessment like a data protection impact assessment. Use a DMP if possible. Check the website again, the SESTA website. Obtain informed consent also for data sharing, preservation, or curation. Remember that. Protect the identities the identities of your informants. And regulate access. So if you are a lot of people in a study, do every partners need to access all data, or can you regulate it in one or another way? And you have to find ways to store your data while processing them in a secure way. And this is the part when your institution needs to provide you with the technical infrastructure. Okay, so ask your institution about the technical infrastructure. They need to provide it to you. And they also need to provide you with advice on how to do this safely. Okay, I'm finished. Any questions before Alexandra will talk? No?